17-year-old Sarah Martinez had nothing left to lose when she walked into Blackstone Garage that grey October morning. The rundown auto shop sat on the wrong side of town, where decent folks didn't venture after dark. Everyone at the diner had warned her about the bikers who worked there. Dangerous men with prison tattoos and hair-trigger tempers. Members of the Iron Brotherhood who settled disputes with fists, not words. But Sarah was desperate. 3 months sleeping in her beat-up Honda had taught her that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. The help-wanted sign in the grimy window promised $40 a day for cleaning. It wasn't much, but it was hope. What nobody told her was that sometimes the most broken people recognize each other. Sometimes outcasts become protectors. Sometimes the family you choose means more than the one that abandoned you. But would these hardened bikers really take in a lost girl, or was she walking into something far more dangerous than poverty? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah's hands trembled as she approached the garage at 5:30 in the morning, hoping to arrive before any of the bikers showed up. The autumn air bit through her thin jacket, and her breath formed small clouds in the pre-dawn darkness. She clutched the crumpled piece of paper with the address, though she'd memorized it hours ago while lying awake in her car. The garage loomed before her like a fortress of rusted metal and broken dreams. Oil stains spread across the cracked concrete like dark blood, and the smell of gasoline and motor oil hung heavy in the air. Motorcycles lined the building's exterior, massive Harleys with chrome that caught the streetlights' glow. Each bike looked like it could devour her Honda in a single bite. She was fumbling with the door handle when heavy footsteps echoed behind her. Sarah spun around, her heart hammering against her ribs. A mountain of a man emerged from the shadows. He stood at least 6'4", with shoulders that seemed to stretch the seams of his leather vest. Tattoos covered his massive arms like sleeves, eagle skulls, and words she couldn't read in the dim light. His beard was streaked with grey, and his dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her want to run. "You the girl who called about cleaning?" His voice rumbled like distant thunder. Sarah's mouth went dry. She managed a tiny nod. "Name's Marcus Rodriguez. They call me Tank." He reached into his pocket and Sarah instinctively stepped back. But he only pulled out a heavy ring of keys, brass and iron, that clinked together like wind chimes. "Been running this place for 15 years. You gonna run off on me like the last 3 girls?" "No, sir." The words came out as barely a whisper. Tank studied her for a long moment, taking in her hollow cheeks, the way her clothes hung loose on her frame, the desperation she couldn't quite hide. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite kindness, but perhaps understanding. "You eat breakfast yet?" Sarah shook her head. "Coffee's always fresh by 6. "Help yourself." He unlocked the garage door and held it open for her. "Come on, let me show you around." The interior of the garage was surprisingly organized. Tools hung on pegboards with military precision. Workbenches were clean despite their obvious use. 3 motorcycles in various stages of repair occupied the center bay, their engines exposed like mechanical hearts. Tank led her to a small office in the back corner. A coffee pot gurgled on a table next to boxes of donuts from the bakery down the street. "Danny brings those every morning. Old habit from when his kid was sick and we helped with hospital bills." He handed her a steaming mug and watched as she wrapped her hands around it, seeking warmth. "Cleaning supplies are in that closet. Bathrooms, office, main floor, and the break room upstairs. Don't touch the bikes or tools without asking. Some of the guys are particular about their equipment." Sarah nodded, sipping the coffee. It was stronger than anything she'd ever tasted, but it warmed her from the inside out. "Most important rule," Tank continued, his voice taking on a serious tone. "What happens in this garage stays in this garage. We don't talk about each other's business outside these walls. You understand?" "Yes, sir. And another thing." He opened the closet and pulled out cleaning supplies, industrial strength stuff that meant business. "Anyone gives you trouble, you tell me. Anyone. That includes cops, social workers, or anybody else who thinks they know your story better than you do. The keys felt heavy in Sarah's palm when he handed them to her. Heavier than they should have been, as if they carried more weight than just access to a building. "You got somewhere safe to sleep?" Tank asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah's cheeks burned. She stared at the concrete floor. "There's a cot in the upstairs break room. Clean sheets in the cabinet. Sometimes we work late on rush jobs, so it's there if you need it." He paused, letting the offer hang in the air without making it sound like charity. "Just until you get on your feet." The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. She'd been prepared for suspicion, for demands, for the kind of treatment she'd grown accustomed to from adults who saw her as a problem to be solved or ignored. He hadn't been prepared for simple human decency. "Thank you," she managed. Tank nodded once, sharp and decisive. 6:30, the crew starts rolling in. They're good men, but they've all got their demons. Don't let the leather and tattoos fool you. Most of them are just trying to stay clean and take care of their families. As he walked away, Sarah stood alone in the garage, holding the keys that felt like they might unlock more than just doors. By the end of her first week, Sarah had learned to recognize the sound of each motorcycle before it pulled into the garage. Tank's Harley rumbled low and steady like rolling thunder. Ghost's bike had a higher pitch, almost musical. Big Jim's sounded like it was barely holding together, all rattles and backfires. Though she'd learned that was intentional, he liked people to underestimate him. She'd also learned to make herself invisible when customers came around. Not because the bikers told her to, but because she'd caught enough. Stares and whispered comments to understand that a teenage girl working in a place like this raised questions nobody wanted to answer. "You don't have to hide in the supply closet every time someone walks in." Ghost told her on Friday afternoon. He was the youngest of the crew, maybe 25, with prematurely grey hair that earned him his nickname. Despite the spiderweb tattoo covering half his neck, he had the gentlest voice of all of them. "I don't want to cause trouble," Sarah said. "Emerging with a mop and bucket. Trouble finds us regardless," Ghost replied, pulling a sandwich from his lunch bag. "Ham and Swiss. My old lady makes 2 every morning out of habit. You want it?" Sarah's stomach had been gnawing at itself for hours, but she shook her head. Taking food felt too much like admitting how desperate she really was. Ghost set the sandwich on the workbench anyway and went back to rebuilding a carburetor. Just gonna sit there and get stale if nobody eats it. She tried to focus on mopping, but the smell of the sandwich made her mouth water. When Ghost stepped outside to smoke, she grabbed it and devoured it in 4 bites, then felt guilty for the rest of the afternoon. Saturday morning brought a different energy to the garage. The bikers arrived earlier, and there was laughter mixed with the usual mechanical sounds. Sarah was scrubbing the office windows when she heard motorcycles approaching, not the familiar sounds of the crew, but something else. Something that made Tank step outside and cross his arms over his chest. Through the window, she watched a group of men in leather jackets examining the bikes parked outside. Different patches on their vests, different colors. The Iron Brotherhood wore black and silver. These men wore red and gold. Even from inside, Sarah could feel the tension crackling like electricity before a storm. Tank's voice carried through the open door, low and controlled. "Can I help you, gentlemen, with something?" "Just admiring the workmanship," one of the strangers replied. "Heard you got yourself a new employee, young girl. That true?" Sarah's blood turned to ice water. She ducked below the windowsill, heart pounding. "What business is that of yours?" Tank's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Just looking out for the community, you understand. Girl that age working in a place like this? People might get the wrong idea." The conversation continued, but Sarah couldn't make out the words. She pressed herself against the wall, wishing she could disappear entirely. When the strangers' motorcycles finally roared away, she stayed hidden until Ghost found her 20 minutes later. "They're gone," he said softly. "You can come out." "Who were they?" Sarah's voice came out shaky. Nobody worth worrying about. But the tightness around Ghost's eyes said otherwise. That afternoon, the crew worked with unusual focus. No jokes, no casual conversation. Sarah cleaned in silence, feeling like she'd somehow brought this tension down on people who'd shown her nothing but kindness. It was Tank who finally broke the silence as closing time approached. Sarah, come here. She approached his workbench where he was cleaning his hands with a rag that had seen better days. You know what this is? He gestured to the patch on his vest, an iron cross surrounded by wings, with Iron Brotherhood written below in Gothic letters. Sarah nodded. Means we take care of our own. Means when somebody tries to intimidate one of us, they're trying to intimidate all of us. He looked at her directly, his dark eyes serious. You're working here now. That makes you one of us, whether you wear the patch or not. But you're not just anything. Tank's voice cut through her protest. Far as I'm concerned, anybody got a problem with you working here can take it up with me personally. Ghost nodded from across the garage. All of us. Big Jim looked up from the engine he was rebuilding. Damn right. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt the weight of protection that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with loyalty. She didn't understand it completely, but she could feel it settling around her like armor she didn't know she needed. Sarah discovered her talent by accident on a Tuesday morning when tanks prized. 1987 Harley-Davidson Softail refused to start. She was mopping around the bike when she noticed oil pooling beneath the engine in a pattern that didn't look right. Not the usual drip from an old gasket, but something more systematic. Excuse me, she said quietly, then caught herself. She'd been working here 2 weeks and still felt like an intruder every time she spoke up. Tank looked up from the paperwork spread across his desk. What's up, kid? I think there's something wrong with your bike. The words tumbled out faster than she intended. The oil leak. It's not coming from where you'd expect. Tank raised an eyebrow, but walked over to examine the Harley. He crouched down, following Sarah's gaze to the small puddle of black liquid on the concrete. Looks normal to me. These old bikes always leak a little. Sarah bit her lip, then pointed to a spot near the transmission. But look at the pattern. It's not dripping straight down. It's coming from inside, like maybe the oil pump gear is cracked. The garage went quiet. Ghost stopped working on a carburetor rebuild. Big Jim looked up from his paperwork. Even Danny, who'd been sweeping in the corner, paused to listen. Tank stared at Sarah for a long moment. You know something about engines? My dad taught me some stuff before he... She stopped, not ready to go down that road. Before. When I was little. Show me, Tank said. With shaking hands, Sarah pointed out the subtle signs she'd noticed. The way the oil splattered suggested internal pressure pushing it out rather than gravity pulling it down. The slight metallic sheen that indicated fresh damage rather than old wear. The barely audible grinding sound when Tank had tried to start it earlier. Tank grabbed his toolbox and began dismantling the engine casing. 20 minutes later, he held up a cracked oil pump gear. Its teeth worn down on one side. I'll be damned, he muttered. How'd you spot that? Sarah shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. The sound was wrong. And the oil pattern. My dad always said engines tell you what's wrong if you know how to listen. Ghost whistled low. That would have blown the whole transmission if we'd kept trying to start it. Tank set the broken gear on his workbench and studied Sarah with new interest. Your dad teach you anything else about bikes? Some. Mostly cars, but the principles are the same. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. I used to help him in his shop on weekends. He said I had good hands for mechanical work. Let's find out, Tank said. He gestured to a partially assembled engine on the far workbench. That's a 1995 Sportster engine. Previous owner tried to rebuild it himself and made a mess of it. Think you can tell me what he did wrong? Sarah approached the engine cautiously. It was like looking at a 3-dimensional puzzle with half the pieces missing or in the wrong places. She studied the arrangement of parts, the way some components seemed forced into positions that didn't quite fit. The cam timing is off, she said after a few minutes, and these gaskets are installed backwards. Plus he used the wrong grade bolts for the cylinder head. Tank nodded slowly. What else? Sarah pointed to the carburetor mounting. This is set up for a different year model. The jets are too big for this engine size. It'll run rich and foul, the plugs. Holy shit, Big Jim said from across the garage. Kid knows her stuff. Tank handed Sarah a socket wrench. Fix it. What? You found the problems. Now fix them. Can't learn just by looking. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the wrench. She'd watched her father work hundreds of times, had even helped with simple tasks, but she'd never rebuilt an engine on her own. What if she made it worse? What if she proved that her moment of insight was just luck? "Take your time," Tank said quietly. "Nobody's timing you." For the next 3 hours, Sarah worked with careful precision. Tank supervised but didn't interfere, letting her figure out each step. When she made mistakes, and she made several, he simply pointed them out and let her correct them herself. When she finally reassembled the last component and stepped back, the engine looked completely different. Professional, clean, ready to bring a motorcycle back to life. Tank connected the spark plugs and hit the starter. The engine roared to life immediately, purring with the smooth rhythm of properly timed machinery. The garage erupted in cheers and applause. Sarah found herself grinning despite her exhaustion. "Well, I'll be damned," Tank said, his voice carrying a note of respect that hadn't been there before. "Looks like we got ourselves a real mechanic." The trouble started on a Thursday afternoon when Officer Bradley pulled his patrol car into the garage lot. Sarah was under the hood of a Chevy pickup, replacing spark plugs, when she heard Tank's voice go cold. "Afternoon, officer. Something I can help you with?" Sarah stayed where she was, but she could see the policeman's polished boots from under the truck's hood. Black leather, military-style laces, the kind that made a statement about authority. "Got a complaint about a miner working here without proper permits," Officer Bradley said. His voice carried the flat tone of someone used to being obeyed, without question. "Need to see some paperwork." "What kind of paperwork?" Tank's boots shifted, positioning himself between the officer and Sarah's location. "Work permits, guardian consent forms, proof of age and identity." The officer's radio crackled with dispatcher chatter. "Girl can't be working here without proper documentation. Could be a liability issue." Sarah's hands froze on the wrench. She'd been dreading this moment since her first day. No guardian to sign forms, no stable address for permits, no way to prove she belonged anywhere, least of all here. "She's learning a trade," Tank said carefully. "Nothing wrong with that, learning or working. Because if she's earning wages without permits, that's a problem. If she's a runaway, that's a bigger problem." Ghost appeared from the other side of the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. Big Jim emerged from the office. Danny stopped sweeping and leaned against his broom. Without saying a word, the Brotherhood had formed a loose circle around the patrol car. "You got a warrant to be asking these questions?" Ghost's voice was deceptively casual. Officer Bradley's hand moved to rest on his radio. "Don't need a warrant to investigate child welfare issues. Where's the girl?" Sarah took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the truck. Her coveralls were stained with motor oil, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come loose during the morning's work. She tried to stand straight. "To look older than her 17 years, I'm—" "Here," she said. The officer studied her with the practiced eye of someone used to categorizing people into neat boxes: runaway, troublemaker, problem to be solved. "How old are you, miss?" 17. "Where are your parents?" Sarah's throat tightened. "I don't have any. Foster care?" "Aged out of the system." Officer Bradley frowned. "System doesn't age out until 18. Left early." Sarah lifted her chin. "It was better for everyone." The officer pulled out a notepad, and Sarah felt the walls closing in. Questions would lead to phone calls. Phone calls would lead to social workers. Social workers would mean losing the only stability she'd found in months. "This isn't necessary," Tank said, stepping closer to Sarah. "Girl's not in trouble. She's learning skills, staying out of trouble, contributing to the community." "Community?" Officer Bradley's tone suggested he found that amusing. "This place has been on our watch list for years. Drug deals, fights, suspected stolen property. Not exactly the environment for a miner." "That's not true," Sarah said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "These men have treated me with more respect than anyone has in years. They've given me work, taught me skills, never asked for anything except honest effort." Big Jim spoke up from across the garage. "Girl's been here 3 weeks. Works harder than most adults I know. Hasn't caused a minute of trouble. Actually helps solve problems," Ghost added. "Fixed Tank's bike when none of us could figure out what was wrong." Officer Bradley looked skeptical. "That's all very touching, but the law is the law." Minor working without permits, potentially unsafe environment, questionable guardianship situation. He clicked his pen and began writing. I'm going to need some official documentation, or this arrangement stops today. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush concrete. Then Tank stepped forward, pulling a business card from his wallet. Tell you what, officer. Give me 24 hours to get the paperwork sorted. In the meantime, here's my lawyer's number. Maybe you could give him a call, explain what specific violations you think you're seeing here. The card exchange felt like watching two gunfighters size each other up. Officer Bradley studied the card, and Sarah caught the moment his expression shifted slightly. Whatever name was on that card carried weight. 24 hours, the officer said finally. After that, if this situation isn't properly documented, the girl finds somewhere else to spend her time. As the patrol car pulled away, Sarah felt her knees go weak. Tank's hand settled on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. Don't worry, kid, he said quietly. Sometimes family means fighting for each other. Saturday arrived with the smell of barbecue smoke and the sound of motorcycles rumbling into the garage parking lot. Sarah had never seen so many Harleys in one place, dozens of them, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. Their riders dismounting with the easy familiarity of old friends. Annual Brotherhood barbecue, Tank explained, adjusting the propane tank under a massive grill. Been doing this for 12 years. Wives, girlfriends, kids, everybody comes. Sarah hung back near the garage entrance, uncertain of her place in this gathering. Through the legal paperwork, Tank's lawyer had miraculously produced overnight. She was officially an apprentice mechanic now, but that didn't make her family. Not really. You planning to hide in there all day? Ghost's wife, Maria, appeared beside her, carrying a covered dish that smelled like heaven. She was a small woman, with laugh lines around her eyes and grease under her fingernails that suggested she knew her way around an engine too. I don't want to intrude, Sarah said. Honey, if Tank invited you, you're not intruding. You're expected. Maria handed her the dish. Potato salad. Make yourself useful and put this on the food table. The backyard behind the garage had been transformed. Picnic tables covered with checkered tablecloths stretched across the space. A banner reading Iron Brotherhood Annual Family Gathering hung between two oak trees. Children ran between the tables, while adults clustered around the grill, cold beers in hand. Sarah set down the potato salad and found herself studying a collection of framed photographs mounted on an easel near the food table. Pictures from previous year's gatherings, but also something more. Images from a motorcycle rally in South Dakota. The group posed in front of a massive mountain sculpture. Tank looked younger, his beard not yet streaked with grey. That's from Sturgis, 2018, said a voice behind her. Sarah turned to find Big Jim's wife, Linda, a woman whose gentle demeanor contrasted sharply with her husband's intimidating appearance. Best trip we ever took. 2 weeks on the road, just the Brotherhood and the open highway. You all traveled together. Convoy style. 37 bikes, 46 people. Camped under the stars, ate beans from cans, and told stories around campfires. Linda pointed to another photo, showing the group around a fire pit, faces illuminated by orange flames. Jim had just gotten out of rehab. Been clean for 6 months, but he was still shaky about being around temptation. Sarah studied Jim's face in the photo. Even in the grainy image, she could see the uncertainty in his eyes. What happened? Tank never left his side. Not once in 2 weeks. When Jim got the shakes, Tank stayed up with him. When he wanted to find a bar, Tank found a late-night diner instead. When he talked about using again, Tank listened until the feeling passed. Linda's voice carried the weight of remembered gratitude. That's what brotherhood means. It means nobody faces their demons alone. But why? I mean, why go through all that trouble for one person? Linda smiled, the kind of expression that suggested she'd asked herself the same question once. Because Jim had done the same thing for Tank when Tank's first wife died. And Ghost had done it for both of them when he came back from Afghanistan, with more ghosts than anyone should carry. And Danny had done it for Ghost when his nightmares got so bad he couldn't sleep. Sarah absorbed this information slowly. It's like a circle, more than that. It's a safety net. Nobody falls through because everybody else is holding the edges. Linda gestured toward the gathering, where Tank was helping a young boy learn to toss horseshoes while Ghost pushed his daughter on a makeshift swing. We all came from broken places, honey. Failed marriages, dead-end jobs, addiction, trauma, family that gave up on us. But here we fix each other. What if someone can't be fixed? Then we love them anyway. Keep loving them until they remember how to love themselves. Linda studied Sarah's face. Tank told us about your situation. About the police, the paperwork problems, sleeping in your car. Sarah's cheeks burned. She'd hoped her circumstances weren't common knowledge. Nobody here judges you for that. Half of us have slept in cars at some point. The other half have done worse. Linda placed a gentle hand on Sarah's arm. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. That's what today is about. Showing you that you belong somewhere. Tank's voice boomed across the yard. Sarah, get over here. Big Jim's trying to claim he taught you everything you know about engines. And I've got money that says he's lying. Laughter erupted from the group around the grill. Sarah found herself smiling despite her nervousness. Go on, Linda said. Family's calling. The manila folder appeared on Tank's desk Monday morning like an unwelcome ghost from Sarah's past. She recognized the state seal immediately, the official letterhead that had followed her through 7 foster homes in 5 years. Her hands went cold as Tank held up the thick stack of papers. Social services sent this over, he said quietly. Your complete file. Sarah's first instinct was to run. She'd gotten good at disappearing when the past caught up with her. But Tank's expression wasn't judgmental. It was the same careful look he wore when examining a particularly complex engine problem. You don't have to read it, she said quickly. I can find somewhere else. Sit down, kid. Tank's voice was gentle but firm. Running away isn't going to solve anything. And I'm not going anywhere. With trembling hands, Sarah lowered herself into the chair across from his desk. Through the office window, she could see Ghost and Big Jim working on a Sportster, their movements familiar and comforting. Normal life continuing, while her world threatened to collapse again. Tank opened the folder and began reading silently. Sarah watched his face, trying to interpret each expression. The slight frown when he reached the section about her mother's overdose. The tightening around his eyes as he read about the first foster home, where her placement lasted exactly 11 days before she was moved for adjustment issues. Says here you were placed with the Morrison family when you were 12, Tank said finally. Lasted 8 months. Longest placement on record? Sarah nodded, remembering. They had a garage. Mr. Morrison restored classic cars as a hobby. He taught me about engines, showed me how to rebuild a carburetor. Her voice grew smaller. But then Mrs. Morrison got pregnant, and they decided they needed the space for their real child. Tank's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Real child. That's what she said. That they needed to focus on their own family now? Sarah stared at her hands. I understood. I wasn't really theirs anyway. Bullshit. The word came out sharp enough to cut glass. Tank set down the folder and leaned forward. Listen to me, Sarah. Family isn't about biology. It's about choice, about showing up when things get hard. But they chose their real child over me. Then they weren't your real family. Tank stood up and walked to the window, watching Ghost demonstrate something to Big Jim. You know what Ghost did before he came here? Sarah shook her head. 3 tours in Afghanistan. Lost half his unit to an IED. Came home with PTSD so bad he couldn't sleep in a bed for 2 years. His own parents told him to get over it and stop embarrassing the family with his problems. Tank turned back to face her. Found him sleeping under the interstate bridge one night, shaking so bad he couldn't hold a wrench steady. What did you do? Brought him here. Gave him work that kept his hands busy and his mind occupied. When the nightmares got bad, somebody always stayed with him. When he couldn't face crowds, we worked around it. When his family wrote him off as broken, we decided he was exactly what we needed. Tank returned to his desk and flipped through more pages of Sarah's file. Big Jim's story isn't much better. Parents kicked him out at 16 for being gay. Lived on the streets for 3 years before ending up in prison on drug charges. Did his time, got clean, but nobody would hire an ex-con. Nobody except us. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand something. Tank closed the folder and met her eyes directly. Every single person in this garage has been thrown away by somebody who was supposed to care about them. Parents, spouses, society. Somebody decided we weren't worth the trouble. Sarah felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. But here's the thing about being thrown away, Tank continued. It teaches you the real value of the people who choose to pick you up. The Morrisons gave up on you because love got inconvenient. That tells you everything you need to know about them, and nothing about your worth. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a business card, sliding it across to Sarah. That's my lawyer's number. He's going to help us make sure you never have to go back into the system. You're 18 in 6 months. Until then, this garage is your legal address, and I'm your official guardian. Sarah stared at the card through blurry eyes. Why? Because Ghost needs someone who understands engines better than he does. Because Big Jim's been wanting to teach somebody his welding techniques. Because this place runs better with you in it. Tank's voice softened. And because sometimes the family you choose is the only family that matters. The motorcycle repair manual appeared on Sarah's workbench the next morning, its cover worn soft from years of use. The pages were filled with handwritten notes in Tank's careful print, diagrams with arrows pointing to crucial components, and yellow sticky notes marking the most important sections. Thought you might want to learn the right way, Tank said, setting down a cup of coffee beside the manual. Instead of just picking things up as you go, Sarah opened the book reverently. The first page bore an inscription in faded blue ink. To Marcus, may this help you build something that lasts. Tad, 1987. This was your father's. He taught me everything I know about engines. Said a manual is just the starting point. Real learning comes from understanding why things work the way they do. Tank pulled up a stool beside her workbench. Figure it's time to pass that along. Over the following weeks, Sarah's education became a group effort. Tank showed her the fundamentals of engine theory, explaining the relationship between compression ratios and power output. Ghost taught her electrical systems, patiently walking her through the maze of wires that brought modern motorcycles to life. Big Jim demonstrated welding techniques, his massive hands surprisingly gentle, as he guided her through her first clean bead. Steady pressure, he murmured, as Sarah held the welding torch. Let the metal tell you what it needs. Too fast and you get a weak joint. Too slow and you burn through. The Brotherhood's investment in her education went beyond technical skills. Danny taught her bookkeeping, showing her how to track parts inventory and calculate labor costs. Maria, Ghost's wife, stopped by twice a week to help with the high school equivalency courses Sarah was completing. You can't just be good with your hands. Tank explained one evening as they worked late on a custom build. You need to understand the business side too. Know what things cost, how to bid jobs, how to deal with suppliers. Sarah absorbed everything with desperate hunger. Each new skill felt like armor against the uncertainty that had defined her life. When she successfully diagnosed a complex transmission problem that had stumped 2 other mechanics, Tank nodded with quiet satisfaction. Customer's going to pick that up tomorrow, he said. $200 repair bill. You just earned your keep for the week. But it wasn't the money that mattered to Sarah. It was the pride in Tank's voice, the way Ghost gave her an approving nod, the fact that her name was appearing on work orders alongside theirs. Her confidence grew with each successful repair. She learned to trust her instincts, to listen to the subtle sounds that indicated problems before they became failures. When a customer brought in a vintage Triumph that 3 other shops had declared unfixable, Sarah spent 2 days methodically working through the electrical system until she found the short circuit hidden inside the headlight housing. How'd you figure that out? The customer asked when he came to pick up his bike. Process of elimination, Sarah replied, wiping her hands on a shop rag. And patience. Tank watched from across the garage, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The manual became Sarah's constant companion. She read it during lunch breaks, studied the diagrams while sitting on the cot upstairs, memorized specifications until she could recite compression ratios and torque settings in her sleep. But more than technical knowledge, it represented something else, investment in her future. "Why did you give this to me?" she asked Tank one afternoon, as they worked side by side rebuilding a shovelhead engine. "Because you remind me of myself at your age," Tank replied, carefully installing new piston rings. "Hungry to learn, willing to work, but nobody giving you a real chance to prove yourself. What happened to you?" "I found a mechanic who took the time to teach me properly. Guy named Frank Kowalski. In the shop on the south side, worked on everything from motorcycles to 18-wheelers. Tank's hands moved with practiced precision as he assembled the engine components. Taught me that mechanical work isn't just a job, it's a craft. Something you can take pride in. Where is he now?" "Died 15 years ago. Heart attack at his workbench." Tank paused in his work. "But every time I teach someone something he taught me, a little bit of him lives on." Sarah understood then that the manual was more than just technical information. It was a chain of knowledge passed from father to son to adopted daughter, each link representing someone who had chosen to invest in the future rather than just the present. "Thank you," she said quietly. Tank nodded once, the gesture carrying more weight than words. "Just promise me something." "What?" "Someday, when you're ready, you'll pass it along to someone else who needs it." The court summons arrived on a Tuesday morning that had started like any other. Sarah was adjusting the carburetor on a 1979 shovelhead when Tank emerged from the office, his face grim as Winterstone. The official document trembled slightly in his weathered hands. "What is it?" Ghost asked, looking up from the Sportster he was rebuilding. Tank held up the papers. "Lawsuit. Marcus Webb and the Red Devils Motorcycle Club are claiming we stole 3 custom bikes from their shop last month." Big Jim's wrench clattered to the concrete floor. "That's impossible. We haven't done business with Webb in 5 years. "Since when?" Sarah asked, not recognizing the name. "Since he tried to muscle in on our territory," Tank replied grimly. "Webb runs the biggest custom shop 3 counties over. Been trying to force smaller operations out of business for years." Sarah studied the summons over Tank's shoulder. The legal language was dense, but the implications were clear. Allegations of theft, demands for financial damages, threats of criminal prosecution. Her stomach dropped as she realized what this meant. "How much are they claiming?" she asked quietly. $60,000 in stolen property and damages. Tank's voice was carefully controlled. "Plus legal fees and punitive damages. Could be over 100 grand when it's all done." The garage fell silent, except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Sarah had learned enough about the business to know that kind of money could destroy them. The Iron Brotherhood wasn't wealthy. They survived on honest work and careful budgeting. "It's because of me," Sarah said, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "They're doing this because I'm here. What makes you think that?" Ghost asked. "The timing." "The police harassment started right after I arrived. Now this," Sarah's hands began to shake. "Webb probably knows about the media attention, the questions about a minor working here. He's using it against you." Tank folded the summons and slipped it into his pocket. "Even if that's true, it doesn't change anything. We don't abandon family because things get complicated. But this could ruin you," Sarah protested. "Your business, your reputation, everything you've built." "And?" Big Jim's voice carried a note of challenge. "You think we haven't faced worse?" Tank walked to the wall where a framed photograph hung, the Brotherhood's first group picture from 12 years ago. 5 men standing beside their motorcycles, all of them looking younger and hungrier. "When we started this place, nobody gave us 6 months, Tank said quietly. "Ex-cons, addicts, veterans with PTSD, banks wouldn't loan us money. Suppliers wouldn't extend credit. Customers crossed the street rather than deal with us." "What changed?" Sarah asked. "We proved them wrong. One honest job at a time, one satisfied customer after another. We built something worth defending." Tank turned to face the group. "This lawsuit isn't about stolen bikes. It's about Webb trying to eliminate competition by destroying our reputation." Ghost nodded slowly. Classic intimidation tactic. File false charges, drag it through the courts, force us to spend money we don't have on lawyers. So what do we do? Danny asked from where he'd been quietly listening. Tank was quiet for a long moment, studying each face in turn. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. We fight. All of us, together. Tank, Sarah began. Maybe I should... No. The word cut through her protest like a blade. You're not going anywhere. You're not the problem here. Webb is the problem. And we don't solve problems by running away from them. Big Jim cracked his knuckles, a sound like tree branches breaking. What do you need from us? Documentation. Every receipt, every work order, every piece of paper that proves where we were and what we were doing the day those bikes supposedly went missing. Tank pulled out his phone. I'm calling Rodriguez. He handled my divorce. Knows his way around court fights. This is going to cost a fortune. Ghost said. Maybe, but losing costs more. Tank looked directly at Sarah. Besides, some things are worth fighting for. Sarah felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. I don't understand why you're doing this for me, because that's what family does, Tank replied simply. We protect each other, even when it's expensive, even when it's dangerous, even when it would be easier to walk away. The Brotherhood spent the rest of the day gathering evidence, organizing files, preparing for a battle none of them had wanted, but all of them seemed ready to fight. And for the first time since the summons arrived, Sarah began to believe they might actually win. The high school diploma ceremony took place in the community center on a humid June evening. Sarah sat among 43 other GED recipients, her hands smooth and steady after months of practice speeches. Her new dress crisp and navy blue, picked out by Maria specifically for the occasion. In the audience, an entire row of leather-clad bikers sat with the kind of focused attention usually reserved for important mechanical repairs. Tank had closed the garage early so everyone could attend. Ghost wore his only button-down shirt. Big Jim had braided his beard specially for the occasion. Even Danny, who rarely left his comfort zone, sat front and center with a disposable camera. Sarah Martinez, the principal announced, and the Iron Brotherhood erupted in cheers that drowned out the polite applause from other families. Walking across that stage to receive her diploma, Sarah caught Tank's eye. He was grinning with the kind of pride she'd only seen when he talked about engines he'd built from scratch. When she returned to her seat, the piece of paper felt heavier than any tool she'd ever held. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the garage, where Maria had organized a potluck dinner that transformed the workspace into something approaching elegant. Tables draped with white sheets, mason jars filled with wildflowers, and enough food to feed an army. Speech, Ghost called out when everyone had filled their plates. Graduate's supposed to make a speech. Sarah's cheeks burned. I don't know what to say. Start with thank you and see where it goes, Tank suggested. She stood slowly, looking around at faces that had become as familiar as her own reflection. These people who had taken in a desperate teenager and somehow turned her into someone with a future. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in my car and washing my hair in gas station bathrooms, she began, her voice steadier than she'd expected. I took the job here because I needed $40 a day to survive. I never expected to find a family. Big Jim wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, not bothering to hide the gesture. You could have hired anyone to clean your garage, Sarah continued. Someone older, more reliable, without the complications that come with taking in a minor. But you took a chance on me anyway. Best decision we ever made, Ghost called out. Sarah smiled, feeling tears threaten. You taught me that family isn't about sharing DNA. It's about showing up when someone needs you. It's about believing in people when they can't believe in themselves. It's about protecting each other even when it costs you. Tank nodded slowly, understanding the reference to the ongoing legal battle with Webb. This diploma doesn't just represent my education. It represents what happens when people refuse to give up on each other. Sarah held up the certificate. So thank you. for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself, for making me part of something bigger than my own survival. The applause this time was softer, but somehow more meaningful. As conversations resumed around the improvised tables, Tank approached with something hidden behind his back. "Graduation present," he said, producing a small box wrapped in newspaper comics. Inside was a set of keys, not the heavy garage keys she'd been carrying for months, but something newer, smaller, more personal. "Apartment keys," Tank explained. "Two-bedroom place about 6 blocks from here. First month's rent is paid. Security deposit too." Sarah stared at the keys, overwhelmed. "Tank, I can't afford—" "You're not paying for it alone. Consider it a business investment." His expression grew serious. "You're 18 now. Legally an adult. Time you had a place of your own. But I like living here. Garage isn't a home, kid. It's a workplace. You need somewhere that's just yours. Somewhere you can invite friends, cook meals that aren't heated up in a microwave, be a normal teenager sometimes." Sarah understood what he wasn't saying, that her independence was important not just for her own growth, but for the Brotherhood's legal protection. That having her own address would make it harder for people like Webb to claim she was being exploited. "Besides," Ghost added, overhearing the conversation, "Maria's been dying to help someone decorate a first apartment. You'd be doing us all a favor by giving her a project. And you'll still work here?" Sarah asked, needing the reassurance. "Every day," Tank confirmed. "This will always be your home base. The apartment is just where you sleep." Sarah closed her fingers around the keys, feeling their weight. Another step toward the kind of normal life she'd never dared imagine for herself. "Thank you," she whispered. Tank's smile was answer enough. Sarah first saw the motorcycle on a sweltering July morning, hidden under a canvas tarp in the garage's back bay. She'd arrived early to beat the heat and found Tank, Ghost, and Big Jim clustered around something, their voices low and conspiratorial. "Morning, kid," Tank said when he noticed her. But his tone carried an unusual note of excitement. "Come here. Want to show you something." They pulled away the tarp like magicians, revealing their greatest trick. Underneath was a motorcycle unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. A custom Harley built from the frame up, every component chosen with surgical precision. The tank was painted deep midnight blue with silver flames that seemed to dance in the fluorescent light. Chrome gleamed on every surface that could hold a polish. "Whose is it?" Sarah asked, running her fingers along the fuel tank's smooth curve. "Yours," Ghost said simply. Sarah's hand jerked back as if the metal had burned her. "What?" "Custom Sportster, 1200cc engine, completely rebuilt transmission, new clutch, fresh paint," Tank recited like he was reading from a technical manual. "Been working on it nights and weekends for the past 2 months. "I can't accept this," Sarah protested, backing away from the bike. "It must have cost thousands. Labor was free," Big Jim said with a shrug. "Parts came from bikes we were scrapping anyway. Paint job was something I owed Tank from a poker game." Tank walked around to the bike's left side and pointed to a small chrome plate mounted just below the seat. Sarah knelt to read the engraving. "To Sarah, Iron Brotherhood forever. Every member gets their own ride eventually," Tank explained. "Can't be part of a motorcycle club without a motorcycle." Sarah's vision blurred as she studied the machine they'd built for her. Every detail spoke of careful thought and genuine affection. The handlebars were positioned for her shorter arms. The seat height was adjusted for her legs. Even the mirrors were angled perfectly for her field of vision. "How did you know my measurements?" she asked. Ghost grinned. "Been watching you work on other bikes for months. Easy enough to figure out what would fit. Besides," Tank added, "we needed an excuse to teach you to ride properly. Can't have you borrowing other people's bikes forever." The first lesson took place in the empty parking lot behind the community center, with Tank riding beside her on his own Harley, his voice calm and patient through the helmet's communication system. "Clutch is about feel, not force," he instructed as Sarah practiced starting and stopping. "Let it out slow until you feel the engagement point. Then ease into the throttle." Learning to ride was like discovering a new language, one spoken through balance. momentum, and the subtle communication between human and machine. Sarah stalled the engine dozens of times that first morning, but Tank never showed impatience, only offered gentle corrections and encouragement. "Fear will get you killed," he said during a water break. "But so will overconfidence. The bike will take care of you if you respect it. Try to dominate it, and it'll put you on the pavement." By the end of the week, Sarah was comfortable with basic maneuvers. The weekend brought highway instruction, the terrifying and exhilarating experience of merging into traffic with nothing between her and the asphalt except skill and courage. Stay visible. Tank coached through the helmet comm. Assume every driver is trying to kill you, but don't let paranoia make you timid. Defensive riding means being assertive when you need to be. The first time Sarah successfully navigated the complex interchange connecting 3 major highways, she pulled into the next rest stop with shaking hands and a grin that wouldn't quit. "How do you feel?" Tank asked, removing his helmet. "Like I could ride to California," Sarah replied. "Good. That's exactly how you should feel." The motorcycle became Sarah's constant companion. She rode to the parts supply store, to the community college where she'd enrolled in automotive technology courses, to the apartment that still felt too large and too quiet. But more than transportation, it represented something profound, visible proof of belonging. When she rode with the Brotherhood on their weekend trips, she wasn't the girl they'd taken in out of charity. She was a member, her bike holding its place in formation, her patches earning respectful nods from other riders they encountered. "Beautiful machine," an older rider commented at a gas station outside Millerville. "Custom work?" "My family built it for me," Sarah replied, the words feeling natural and true. Tank overheard and smiled, checking the oil level on his own bike. Later, as they rode the winding country roads back toward home, Sarah understood that the motorcycle was more than metal and chrome and carefully calibrated mechanical systems. It was freedom. It was acceptance. It was the physical manifestation of everything the Iron Brotherhood had given her: a place to belong, a family to ride with, and a future that stretched out ahead of her like an open highway. The hospital bracelet was still on Tank's wrist when Sarah arrived at the emergency room, the plastic band stark white against his oil-stained skin. She found him sitting on the edge of a gurney, arguing with a nurse about discharge papers, while Ghost paced the hallway like a caged wolf. 37 stitches, Ghost said without preamble when he saw Sarah. "Broken nose, possible concussion, and they want to keep him overnight for observation." Sarah's hands went cold. What happened? 3 guys jumped him outside Murphy's bar, seemed to know exactly when he'd be leaving, exactly which parking spot he'd use. Ghost's voice carried a dangerous edge. "They asked about you specifically before they started swinging." The weight of guilt settled on Sarah's shoulders like a lead blanket. She'd been working late at the garage, catching up on a transmission rebuild that had taken longer than expected. Tank had gone to Murphy's for his usual Thursday night beer and game of pool, a routine he'd followed for years, without incident. "This is my fault," Sarah said quietly. "Like hell it is." Tank called from the gurney, overhearing despite the nurse's attempts to take his blood pressure. "This is Webb's fault. Him and his hired muscle." The nurse, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and no patience for arguments, shooed them away from the patient area. "Family only past this point, and only one at a time." "She is family," Tank said firmly. "Closer than most blood relatives I know." In the private room where they'd moved Tank for the night, Sarah got her first clear look at the damage. His left eye was swollen shut, purple and black spreading across half his face. The stitches traced a jagged line from his hairline to his jaw, and his knuckles were split and raw. "You should see the other guys," Tank said, attempting humor despite the obvious pain. "Tank, I'm sorry. I should never have—" "Stop!" His voice cut through her apology. "You didn't make Webb file a frivolous lawsuit. You didn't make him hire thugs to intimidate witnesses. You didn't do anything except exist in a place where some people think you don't belong." Sarah slumped into the visitor's chair, feeling defeated. Maybe I should disappear for a while. Until this legal thing blows over. Tank tried to sit up straighter and winced. You know what the first rule of motorcycle safety is? The sudden change of subject confused her. Check your mirrors. Never run from a fight you can win. Tank's good eye fixed on her with laser intensity. Webb thinks he can scare us into submission. Thinks we'll fold under pressure because we're just a bunch of ex-cons and misfits. He's wrong, but you're hurt because of me. I'm hurt because I chose to fight for my family. That's what you do when someone threatens what matters to you. Tank's voice softened slightly. You think this is the first time I've taken a beating for something I believed in? Ghost appeared in the doorway with coffee and a grim expression. Police are here. Want to take statements. The officer who entered was younger than Officer Bradley, with an earnest face and a notebook already filled with details. He asked Tank to recount the attack while Sarah listened, her anger building with each detail. Did you recognize any of the assailants? The officer asked. Never seen them before. But they knew enough about my routine to set up an ambush. Tank shifted carefully on the hospital bed. And they made it clear this was about the girl. What exactly did they say? That I should stop protecting troublemakers. That some people don't belong in decent businesses. That accidents tend to happen when people don't take good advice. The officer wrote everything down carefully. We'll investigate, but without witnesses or clear evidence linking this to the ongoing civil suit. We understand, Ghost interrupted. Thanks for taking the report. After the officer left, the room fell into heavy silence. Sarah studied Tank's battered face and felt something shift inside her. A transformation from guilt to fury to cold determination. They think I'm going to run, she said finally. Are you? Tank asked. No! The word came out harder than she'd intended. I'm going to fight. For you. For the garage. For everything we've built. Tank smiled despite the pain it obviously caused. Good. Because that lawsuit goes to court in 3 weeks, and we're going to need all hands on deck. Sarah stood up, her resolve crystallizing like metal cooling after welding. What do you need me to do? For now, go home, get some rest. Tomorrow we start preparing our defense. Tank's voice carried absolute confidence. Webb picked the wrong family to mess with. Looking at the hospital. Bracelet on Tank's wrist, a symbol of vulnerability and the price of loyalty. Sarah understood that sometimes love means being willing to fight for the people who matter most. The legal victory. Document arrived on a Friday afternoon that felt more like Christmas morning than the end of a grueling court battle. Sarah held the official papers with trembling hands, reading the words that changed everything. Case dismissed with prejudice. Plaintiff ordered to pay defendants legal fees and court costs. Tank, still sporting fading bruises from the attack 3 weeks earlier, grinned as he read over her shoulder. Turns out Webb's stolen motorcycles were sitting in his own warehouse the whole time. Amazing what happens when judges order surprise inspections. The courthouse steps had been crowded with media and curious onlookers when the verdict was announced. Sarah had expected to feel relief, but instead she felt something deeper. Vindication for everyone who'd believed in the Brotherhood when the rest of the world saw only trouble. How did you know? She asked Rodriguez, Tank's lawyer, who was packing his briefcase with characteristic efficiency. Know what? That Webb was lying. That we'd win. Rodriguez smiled, the expression of someone who'd been practicing law long enough to recognize truth when he heard it. Because your story never changed. Every time I asked Tank about that day, he gave me the same details, same timeline, same witnesses. Webb's story kept shifting every time we challenged it. The celebration that evening filled the garage with the kind of joy that comes from surviving something that could have destroyed everything. Customers who'd stood by them during the legal battle stopped by with congratulations. Other motorcycle clubs sent representatives to offer support. Even Officer Bradley appeared, looking uncomfortable but determined. Wanted to apologize, he said to Sarah, removing his hat. I let other people's prejudices cloud my judgment. That wasn't fair to you or to these men. Tank accepted the apology with gracious restraint. Though Sarah could see the satisfaction in his eyes, the real celebration came later, when the garage had cleared and only the Brotherhood remained. Ghost produced a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for special occasions. Big Jim ordered pizza from the good place across town. Maria brought homemade cake with "Congratulations" written in blue frosting. "Speech," Danny called out, echoing the graduation ceremony from months earlier. But this time, Sarah didn't hesitate. She stood on a milk crate so everyone could see her, feeling the weight of everything that had led to this moment. 6 months ago, people told me to stay away from this place. Said you were dangerous. Said I'd get hurt associating with criminals and outcasts. She looked around at faces that had become her anchor in an uncertain world. They were right about one thing. I did get hurt. I got hurt by people who couldn't understand that family isn't about perfect histories or clean records. Tank raised his bottle of beer in a silent salute. But I also found something I'd never had before. I found people willing to fight for me when I couldn't fight for myself. People who saw potential where others saw problems. People who chose to protect rather than abandon when things got difficult. Sarah's voice grew stronger as she continued. This victory isn't just about winning a lawsuit. It's about proving that chosen family is real family, that people can change, that second chances matter. The applause was thunderous in the small space, bouncing off concrete walls and metal rafters. Later, as they cleaned up the remnants of the celebration, Tank pulled Sarah aside. "Got something for you?" he said, producing an envelope from his desk drawer. Inside were official documents establishing Sarah as a legal partner in the business. Her name appeared alongside Tank's on the incorporation papers, making her part owner of everything they'd built together. "Tank, I can't—" "You already did. You fought for this place when it would have been easier to walk away. You earned this." He pointed to the signature line at the bottom of the contract. "Besides, I'm not getting any younger. Need someone I trust to help carry the load." Sarah signed her name with careful precision, understanding that this wasn't just about business ownership. It was about legacy, about being trusted with something precious, about having a permanent place in the family she'd found. "What now?" she asked, setting down the pen. "Now we keep building. Keep helping people who need second chances. Keep proving that family is about choice, not circumstances." Tank smiled, the expression transforming his scarred face. "And maybe we expand a little. Been thinking about offering motorcycle safety classes, teaching kids the right way to ride before they teach themselves the wrong way." Sarah nodded, already envisioning the possibilities. The legal victory had given them more than vindication. It had given them a platform to help others the way the Brotherhood had helped her. The document in her hands represented more than legal partnership. It represented permanent belonging, unshakable trust, and a future built on the foundation of everything they'd fought to protect. The apartment keys felt different in Sarah's hand now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of uncertainty had finally lifted. She stood in the doorway of her first real home, watching Big Jim and Ghost maneuver her new couch through the narrow hallway, while Maria directed traffic with the precision of a seasoned general. "Left a little more," Maria called out. "Watch the doorframe. That's original wood molding. The 2-bedroom apartment 6 blocks from the garage had transformed over the past month from an empty shell into something that resembled home. Furniture donated or built by the Brotherhood filled each room. Ghost had installed new electrical fixtures. Danny had refinished the hardwood floors. Tank had personally tested every lock and window latch. "Place looks good," Tank said, surveying the living room where afternoon sunlight streamed through windows flanked by curtains Maria had sewn herself. "Feels like you." Sarah wasn't sure what that meant, but she could see what he was talking about. Motorcycle magazines stacked neatly on the coffee table. Tools organized in a converted bedroom that served as her workshop. Photographs from Brotherhood gatherings covering the refrigerator door. "Still can't believe it's mine," she said, running her hand along the kitchen counter where she'd eaten breakfast that morning. Eggs and toast prepared in her own kitchen, eaten at her own table. "Better get used to it," Ghost said, collapsing onto the couch with dramatic flair. "Maria's already planning your housewarming party." The doorbell rang before Sarah could respond. Through the peephole, She saw a woman about her own age holding a covered dish and wearing the uncertain expression of someone trying to decide if they were at the right address. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked, opening the door. "I'm Kelly Morrison. I live downstairs." The woman gestured toward the apartment below. "Brought you some banana bread." "Welcome to the building." The name Morrison triggered a memory, the foster family that had kept Sarah longest. The ones who'd taught her about engines before deciding they needed space for their real child. But this Kelly looked nothing like the Morrisons she remembered. "That's very kind," Sarah said, accepting the dish. "Would you like to come in?" Kelly's eyes widened as she took in the apartment's occupants, 3 large men in leather vests sitting around a coffee table covered with takeout containers. But if she felt intimidated, she hid it well. "Just for a minute," she said. Tank stood and extended his hand with formal courtesy. "Marcus Rodriguez. Friends call me Tank, you're Sarah's neighbor." "Kelly Morrison. I teach 3rd grade at Jefferson Elementary." She shook Tank's hand, then Ghost's, then Big Jim's, her grip firm and confident. "I heard someone new was moving in upstairs. Wanted to make sure you knew about trash pickup days and parking regulations." "Very neighborly of you," Maria said, appearing from the kitchen. "I'm Maria Sullivan. Sarah's like family to us." Kelly's expression shifted as she processed this information. "Family? Chosen family," Sarah explained. "These people took me in when I had nowhere else to go. Taught me a trade, helped me get my education, gave me a future." "What kind of trade?" Kelly asked, genuine curiosity replacing initial wariness. "Motorcycle repair and restoration. I'm a partner in Blackstone Garage." Sarah pointed to her work clothes draped over a chair. "I've been working there almost 2 years now." Kelly studied Sarah's face, and something clicked into recognition. "Wait, are you the girl the newspaper wrote about? The one who testified before the city council about youth employment programs?" Sarah nodded, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. The article had been Tank's idea, a way to counter negative publicity from Webb's lawsuit by highlighting success stories. "That was really brave," Kelly said. "Standing up to all those people who wanted to shut down your program wasn't brave," Sarah replied. "Just honest. These people saved my life. Seemed like the least I could do was tell the truth about it." Big Jim cleared his throat. "Speaking of truth, we should probably get going. Let Sarah settle in properly." As the Brotherhood prepared to leave, each member offering final advice about apartment living, Sarah felt the strange sensation of watching 2 worlds intersect. Her old life of isolation and survival, and her new life of belonging and community. "Your family seems wonderful," Kelly said after the others had gone. "Very protective." "They are." Sarah looked around her apartment, her home, and marveled at how normal it all felt. Different from what most people expect, but wonderful. "Good neighbors are hard to find," Kelly said, heading toward the door. "If you ever need anything, sugar, a ride somewhere, someone to water plants when you're out of town, just knock." After Kelly left, Sarah stood alone in her apartment for the first time. The silence felt peaceful, rather than lonely, filled with the presence of people who cared about her safety and happiness. The keys in her hand represented more than access to physical space. They represented independence, earned through family support, solitude chosen rather than forced, and the rare luxury of a place that was truly her own. The college acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, its official seal and heavyweight paper making it feel more like a legal document than a simple notification. Sarah stared at her name printed in formal type. "Dear Ms. Martinez, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the Automotive Technology program at Central Valley Community College." She read the letter 3 times before the words fully registered, then carried it to the garage where Tank was rebuilding a transmission with the methodical precision of a surgeon. "Tank," she said quietly, not wanting to interrupt his concentration, but unable to contain her excitement. He looked up from the gear assembly, noticed the letter in her hands, and set down his tools. "Good news or bad news?" "I got in. Full scholarship for the automotive engineering program." Sarah's voice carried wonder. as if she couldn't quite believe her own words. Tank's face broke into a grin that made him look 20 years younger. I told you that essay would do the trick. From survival to success, how mentorship changed my life. Scholarship Committee probably never read anything like it. Ghost emerged from under the hood of a Camaro, wiping his hands on a shop rag. What's all the excitement about? Sarah got into college, Tank announced. Full ride. The garage erupted in congratulations. Big Jim appeared from the office where he'd been doing paperwork. Danny stopped organizing inventory to add his voice to the celebration. Even Maria, who'd been helping with the bookkeeping, emerged from the back room with tears in her eyes. When do classes start? She asked, pulling Sarah into a fierce hug. Fall semester. But I can take evening classes, so I don't have to quit working here. Sarah looked around at faces that had become her foundation. If that's okay with everyone. Kid, Tank said, his voice carrying mock seriousness. You think we're letting you get away that easy? We got too much invested in your education to stop now? The conversation continued through lunch break, with each member of the Brotherhood offering advice about college life, study habits, and balancing work with academics. But Sarah noticed Tank had grown quiet, his expression thoughtful as he considered implications she hadn't yet grasped. Later, when the others had returned to their projects, Tank pulled her aside for a private conversation in his office. This is a big opportunity, he said, settling into his desk chair. 2-year program, right? Associate degree in automotive technology? Sarah nodded. With an option to transfer to the State University for a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. Tank was quiet for a long moment, studying the acceptance letter. You know what this means? That I'll have credentials to back up what I already know. More than that, means you'll be qualified to run your own shop, design custom builds, maybe even teach others what you've learned. Tank leaned forward. Question is, what do you want to do with that knowledge? Sarah had been so focused on getting accepted that she hadn't thought much about long-term goals. I want to keep working here with you, with the family, and we want you here too. But Sarah, you're young, talented. This acceptance letter opens doors I never had access to. Tank's voice carried a note of something Sarah couldn't identify, pride mixed with concern. Don't limit yourself because you're comfortable. I'm not comfortable, Sarah protested. I'm home, Tank smiled at that. Good answer. But home should be a place that helps you grow, not a place that holds you back. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment, reading through the course catalogue and financial aid information. The program was comprehensive: advanced engine theory, computer diagnostics, business management, even courses on emerging technologies like electric vehicles and hybrid systems. Her phone rang, interrupting her planning. Tank's voice carried clearly through the speaker. Been thinking about our conversation, he said. Got a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? Business expansion. Been getting requests for custom work we don't have the expertise to handle properly. High-end restoration, one-off builds, that kind of thing? Tank paused. What if we created a separate division? Custom shop attached to the main garage. You'd run it once you graduate. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. You're serious? Dead. Serious. Your college education, our financial backing, shared customer base. Think about it. Sarah's custom cycles has a nice ring to it. The possibility hung in the air, like a challenge and a promise combined. Sarah looked around her apartment, at the motorcycle magazines and technical manuals that reflected her passion, at the photographs of the Brotherhood that represented her foundation. I don't have to decide now, do I? Course not. Got 2 years to figure it out. But Sarah? Tank's voice grew serious. Whatever you decide, you'll have our support. College, career, whatever direction you choose. That's what family does. After hanging up, Sarah held the acceptance letter again, understanding now that it represented more than educational opportunity. It represented the luxury of choices, something she'd never had before finding her place with the Iron Brotherhood. The youth program certificate hung in a simple black frame on the garage office wall. its official seal and formal language, making Sarah's accomplishment feel both surreal and permanent. Central Valley Youth Mentorship Program, official certification, Sarah Martinez, Program Director. She studied the document while waiting for the first group of teenagers to arrive for orientation. Tank had suggested the program 6 months earlier, but Sarah had never imagined it would grow so quickly or feel so important. Nervous? Ghost asked, appearing in the doorway with a steaming cup of coffee. Terrified, Sarah admitted. What if I can't reach them? What if they don't trust me? Then you'll figure it out. Same way you figured out everything else. Ghost settled into the chair across from her desk. Besides, you've got advantages most counselors don't have. Like what? Like you've been where they are. Slept in cars, went hungry, felt like nobody gave a damn whether you lived or died. Ghost's voice carried the weight of personal experience. These kids can spot fake concern from a mile away, but they'll recognize real understanding when they see it. The first group consisted of 5 teenagers, all court-ordered into the program as an alternative to juvenile detention. Sarah had read their files: shoplifting, truancy, minor drug possession, assault charges that stemmed from desperate situations rather than criminal intent. Marcus, 15, had been living in his grandmother's car since his mother's latest boyfriend decided he was tired of sharing space. Jennifer, 16, had been caught stealing baby formula for her infant sister. Tommy, 14, had punched a teacher who'd called him worthless one too many times. Welcome to Blackstone Garage, Sarah said as they gathered in the break room that had been converted into a classroom. I know you're here because a judge said you had to be, not because you chose to be. I was in similar situations when I was your age. Jennifer rolled her eyes. Right, like you know what it's like. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed them a picture from 2 years earlier. Herself at 17, hollow-cheeked and exhausted, standing next to the Honda that had been her only shelter. I lived in that car for 3 months before I found this place. Washed my hair in gas station bathrooms, ate whatever I could afford with the money I made, washing dishes. Sarah set down the phone. So yeah, I know what it's like. The room went quiet as the teenagers processed this information. What changed? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I met people who saw potential instead of problems, who taught me skills instead of just lecturing me about poor choices. Sarah gestured toward the garage floor, where Tank and Big Jim were working on a custom build. They gave me a chance to prove I was worth something. Over the following weeks, the program took shape around practical skills and personal connection. Mornings began with basic mechanical instruction: how to change oil, replace brake pads, diagnose simple problems. Afternoons focused on life skills, budgeting, job interview techniques, conflict resolution. But the real transformation happened in the quiet moments between formal instruction. When Jennifer broke down, crying because her sister's father had disappeared, leaving them with no income. When Marcus shared that he'd been saving money by skipping meals so his grandmother could afford her medication. When Tommy admitted that hitting the teacher had felt like the only way to make the humiliation stop. The thing about hitting bottom, as Sarah told them during one afternoon session, is that it gives you a solid place to start building. You can't fall any further, so the only direction left is up. Tank became an unexpected favorite among the group, his intimidating appearance offset by patient instruction and dry humor. Ghost taught them motorcycle safety, emphasizing the respect required to handle powerful machines. Big Jim demonstrated welding techniques with the kind of precision that turned metal joining into art. The breakthrough came when Jennifer successfully diagnosed a complex electrical problem that had stumped 2 experienced mechanics at another shop. How'd you figure that out? Tank asked, genuine admiration in his voice. Same way Sarah taught us. Process of elimination, understanding how systems work together. Jennifer grinned, the first real smile Sarah had seen from her. Turns out I'm good at this stuff. By the program's 3rd month, all 5 original participants had completed their court requirements. But none of them wanted to leave. Can we keep coming? Marcus asked during what was supposed to be their final session. Even though we don't have to anymore? Sarah looked around at faces that had transformed from sullen and defensive to engaged and hopeful. This program doesn't end just because the court says it does. It ends when you don't need it anymore. What if we never don't need it? Tommy asked. Sarah smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. Then you become part of the family. Same as everyone else here. The business partnership papers lay spread across Tank's desk like a map to the future. Official legal documents that would fundamentally change the structure of everything they'd built together. Sarah studied the contract language that would make her Tank's equal partner rather than his apprentice. 50% ownership in Blackstone Garage and its expanding operations. You sure about this? She asked, pen hovering over the signature line. I'm only 20, still in college, still learning. Tank leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same careful attention he'd given complex engine problems for 30 years. Sarah, I've been sure about you since the day you spotted that cracked oil pump gear. This isn't charity or sentiment. It's good business. The garage had grown substantially over the past year. The youth program had attracted positive media attention, leading to increased customer loyalty and referrals. Sarah's college coursework in business management had helped streamline operations and improve profit margins. The custom restoration work they'd begun taking on commanded premium prices. But what about Ghost, Big Jim? They've been here longer. They're craftsmen, not business leaders, Tank interrupted gently. Good men, skilled workers, but they don't have your vision for where this place can go. Through the office window, Sarah could see that vision taking shape. The youth program now operated out of a dedicated space they'd added to the building. 6 teenagers worked alongside the Brotherhood members, their initial court-ordered participation having evolved into genuine apprenticeships. 2 of the original group had already been hired as full-time employees. The partnership includes the youth program. Sarah asked, reviewing the contract details. Everything. Garage, custom shop, mentorship program, even the coffee fund. Tank smiled. Though I'm keeping executive control over the thermostat. Some things aren't negotiable. Ghost appeared in the doorway, wiping grease from his hands. Still negotiating? She's being cautious, Tank replied. Making sure she's not getting screwed by a devious old mechanic. Smart girl. Tank's been known to slip extra responsibilities into contracts. Ghost winked at Sarah. But in this case, you'd be crazy not to sign. Place wouldn't run half as well without you. The truth was that Sarah had been functioning as Tank's partner in everything but name for months. She handled scheduling, vendor negotiations, and customer relations, while Tank focused on the complex technical work he loved most. Her college classes in accounting and business law had made her invaluable for managing the administrative side of a growing enterprise. What happens if you decide to retire? Sarah asked. Then you buy out my share at fair market value. Contract includes a formula for determining that value, plus a payment plan that won't bankrupt you. Tank pointed to a section near the end of the document. Deal. But I'm not planning to retire anytime soon. Figured we'd work together until you get tired of putting up with my stubborn ways. What if I want to expand in directions you don't agree with? Then we argue about it like business partners do, and eventually reach a compromise that probably makes both of us slightly unhappy. Tank's expression grew serious. Sarah, this partnership isn't about giving you something you haven't earned. It's about recognizing what you've already contributed and ensuring you have the authority to keep building. Sarah signed her name with careful precision, each letter representing a commitment to the place and people who had given her everything she'd never dared hope for. As she set down the pen, Tank produced a small wrapped box from his desk drawer. Partnership gift, he explained. Inside was a new nameplate for the office door. Sarah Martinez, partner. Below it a smaller plate reading, if you're not part of the solution, you're probably part of the problem. That's terrible advice, Sarah said, laughing despite herself. Worked pretty well for us so far. Tank helped her install the nameplate beside his own. Besides, someone needs to balance out my natural optimism. The ceremony was interrupted by the arrival of a potential customer, a woman with a vintage Triumph that needed complete restoration. She looked uncertainly at Sarah, clearly expecting to deal with Tank. "This is my partner, Sarah Martinez," Tank said smoothly. "She handles our custom restoration work. Best eye for detail I've ever seen." As Sarah discussed the project requirements and timeline with the customer, Tank watched with quiet satisfaction. The partnership papers might be new, but the reality they formalized had been months in the making. Later, after the customer had left with a detailed estimate and timeline, Sarah stood in the doorway of her office, their office, and marveled at how normal it felt to be responsible for something larger than her own survival. The partnership papers represented more than shared ownership. They represented trust, mutual respect, and the rare gift of being seen as essential rather than expendable. The wedding photograph captured everything that mattered most. Sarah in a simple white dress that Maria had helped her choose, surrounded by the Iron Brotherhood in their finest leather vests, all of them grinning with the uninhibited joy of people who understood the true meaning of family. Tank stood beside her in the place traditionally reserved for fathers, his weathered face transformed by pride and happiness. Ghost and Big Jim flanked them like protective bookends, while Maria held the bouquet of wildflowers that had been picked from the field behind the garage that morning. "Look at that," Sarah said, studying the photograph 3 hours after the ceremony. "We actually look respectable. Don't let it go to your head," Tank replied, loosening his tie. "Tomorrow we're back to being dangerous outlaws who corrupt innocent teenagers." The wedding had been held in the garage. Of course, the only place that felt appropriate for celebrating the union of Sarah Martinez and David Chen, the social worker who'd initially come to investigate the youth program and stayed to fall in love with both the mission and the woman running it. "Your family is incredible," David said, watching Ghost teach some of the teenagers how to dance, while Big Jim provided musical accompaniment on a guitar that had seen better days. "I've never seen anything like this." Sarah followed his gaze, taking in the scene that had become beautifully familiar over the past 4 years. Former program participants who now worked as mechanics or had gone on to college. Current teenagers who'd found their way to the garage through various forms of trouble. Community members who'd initially viewed the Brotherhood with suspicion but had gradually become allies and friends. "They saved my life," Sarah said simply. "Now they're trying to save everyone else's." The garage had been transformed for the occasion, with string lights draped from the rafters and tables covered in white cloths. But underneath the decorations, it remained fundamentally the same space where Sarah had first learned that family could be chosen rather than inherited. Tank approached with 2 glasses of champagne and a slightly overwhelmed expression. "Your husband's asking about honeymoon plans." "Husband," Sarah repeated, testing the word. "Still sounds strange. Good strange or bad strange?" "Good strange. Like when you first told me I could stay here permanently." Sarah accepted the champagne, but didn't drink it immediately. "Tank, I need to ask you something." "Shoot. When you took me in, did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" She gestured around the garage, which now housed 3 separate programs: the original motorcycle repair business, the custom restoration shop, and the youth mentorship program that had helped over 50 teenagers in the past 2 years. Tank considered the question seriously. "Honestly? No, I thought I was hiring a cleaning girl who might stick around for a few months if we were lucky. What changed your mind?" "You did. Every day you showed up, worked hard, never complained, even when things got difficult." Tank's voice grew thoughtful. "But mostly it was watching you care about this place the way the rest of us did. That's when I knew you weren't just passing through." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sarah's college advisor, Professor Williams, who'd driven 2 hours to attend the ceremony. She carried a small wrapped package and wore the slightly amazed expression of someone seeing her student's life outside the classroom for the first time. Sarah, "This is wonderful," she said, embracing her former student. "I had no idea your family was so extensive." "Neither did I until I found them," Sarah replied. "Professor Williams, this is Tank Rodriguez. He's the one who really deserves credit for my education." Tank shook the professor's hand with characteristic modesty. "Sarah did all the hard work. I just made sure she had a place to study." Professor Williams presented her gift, a framed copy of Sarah's final thesis. Community-based. Mentorship, breaking cycles of poverty through. Practical skills training. It had been published in the Journal of Youth Development and cited by several other researchers. "Your work is making a real difference," the professor said. "The model you've developed here is being replicated in 3 other states." As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Sarah found herself alone with Tank in the office, where so much of her transformation had taken place. The wedding photograph sat on the desk beside pictures from graduation ceremonies, youth program celebrations, and countless ordinary moments that had shaped her journey. "Any regrets?" Tank asked. Sarah looked through the window at David, helping Ghost clean up the remnants of the celebration, at former program participants who'd stayed late to share stories and reconnect, at the garage that had become the center of a community built around second chances and chosen family. "Only one," she said. "What's that?" "That it took me 17 years to find this place," Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of complete contentment. "But I guess some things are worth waiting for," Tank nodded, understanding that the photograph they'd taken that day represented more than a wedding. It represented the completion of a journey from desperate survival to joyful belonging, and the beginning of a future built on the unshakable foundation of family, chosen with both heart and intention.